Idaho Matters podcast is brought to you by St. Luke's On-Demand Virtual Care, which allows patients to see a provider from their home using a computer or smartphone with on-demand care for common ailments such as a cough, sore throat, or a sinus issue. More information at stlukesonline.org. Idaho Matters is taking a deep dive into the loss of farmland here in the Gem State. Are you a farmer? What challenges do you face as farmland shrinks in Idaho? We want to hear your story. Email us at idahomatters@boisestate.edu or leave us a voicemail using the Talk to Us feature in the Boise State Public Radio app. And then listen to our series on farming called Land and Legacy. Episodes available on Monday afternoons in the Idaho Matters podcast feed. From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudet. This is Idaho Matters. It's Friday, which means it's time for our Reporter Roundtable. If you are familiar, that means we're going to take the next hour getting you up to date on the news that made headlines around our region this last week. And today, our panel includes Maxfield Silverson, editor of the Star News, Sydney Kidd, reporter with Boise Dev, Brian Clark, Idaho Statesman opinion writer, and Logan Finney with Idaho Reports on Idaho Public Television, along with Drew Dodson, reporter and editor for the Valley Lookout. Hi, everybody.
Happy Friday, Gemma.
Happy Friday. So I want to begin with what's going on in the midst of the government shutdown. So, Logan, as we know, the U.S. Senate actually approved some Trump administration appointees, 4 of them from Idaho. So, Logan, I want to talk about these 4 appointees from Idaho. But before we do, can you kind of give us some background as to why it's taken months for these appointments to happen?
Yeah, sure thing. I was actually just looking back in my notes, and one of these confirmation hearings happened way back at the beginning of June, so it has been quite a while that we've been waiting. Unlike the US House, which is a pretty majority-driven institution, in the Senate, it's really, really easy for the minority members to block things. A lot of the business that happens in the Senate happens by what's called unanimous consent. So as long as nobody objects, the Senate goes along and does what it wants to. But the Democrats in the minority in the Senate have been using their procedural powers to slow business down, and they've been delaying or blocking, and they have not been agreeing to things that under past presidential administrations, the minority party in the Senate would have been agreeing to get these lower level appointments through the process pretty quickly. And so, in response to that, somewhat recently, the majority, the GOP in the US Senate, they've changed their rules a little bit so that they can consider these appointments in blocks. So you could do a group of appointments of people to a bunch of positions and get them all taken care of in one vote instead of having to vote on them each one at a time. And that is what happened earlier this week when they approved more than 100 appointees, 4 of which are from Idaho, like we mentioned.
Okay, so let's talk about those 4. The first, Logan, is Bart Davis. He will once again be the U.S. Attorney for Idaho. So tell us about this.
Sure, Bart Davis is a familiar name for Idaho politicos. He's appointed to the U.S. Attorney position here. He was appointed to that U.S. Attorney position for Idaho in the first Trump administration as well. He's an attorney from Eastern Idaho. He spent a long time in the state legislature. He was the leader in the state Senate for a long time. I covered him when he was on the redistricting commission most recently. So he's going to be basically the top federal prosecutor for the state of Idaho. He's going to oversee the attorney's office. Basically, if someone is getting charged with a federal crime in Idaho, it goes through the U.S. Attorney's Office. It's a subunit of the Department of Justice, essentially.
Okay, and then there's Alex Adams. Now, he was Idaho's Health and Welfare Director. So tell us about him and his new position within the Trump administration.
Definitely. Adams, he would before taking over the helm at Health and Welfare, he was kind of Governor Otter and Governor Little's budget guy over at the Division of Financial Management. He took the helm at Idaho Health and Welfare fairly recently, and in his time there, he basically oversaw a big overhaul and big investment in the state's foster care system. The state has had a lot of foster issues over many, many years, and Adams, when he came to Health and Welfare, his mission was basically get things under get things sorted in the foster care system. That apparently got attention from the Trump administration, and he was selected. Oh, let me make sure I get the title right. Adams was selected to be Assistant Secretary for Family Support under Health and Human Services. So he'll be working under Secretary RFK Jr., working on, similar to how he was doing here in Idaho, he'll be working on family programs for the federal government.
And then, Logan, there's Brandon Judd. So tell us who he is and then what his role will be.
Sure. Yeah. Of these people, Brandon Judd was the name that I hadn't heard of before. Apparently, he's from
Hmm.
Pocatello. He spent a long, long time in Customs and Border Patrol. He was the union head for Border Patrol for a long time, and now he's been appointed as the ambassador to Chile. So he will be headed to Chile to represent our country to their government down in South America. And I haven't seen an exact, explanation of why Chile specifically. But
Hmm.
my understanding is that a lot of the folks who are coming across the southern border into the United States are coming from a variety of South American countries. So it kind of makes sense that someone with border enforcement security experience would get appointed to represent the U.S. to a South American country where possibly some of these people crossing the border might be coming from.
And then, Logan, the final appointment from Idaho is Michael Boren. Now, if that name sounds familiar, he is the co founder of Clearwater Analytics. So, again, what will be his new role in the Trump administration?
Sure, he was confirmed as the Undersecretary of Agriculture for Natural Resources and Environment. It's kind of a wordy, jargony title, but basically he's overseeing the natural resources section of USDA, and the chief of the Forest Service will be a direct report to him, who's another Idahoan, Tom Schultz, and he was confirmed earlier. He was not part of this big block.
Hmm. So, Logan, something kind of interesting with Boren being, within the U.S. Forest Service is that in the past he's actually clashed with the U.S. Forest Service over some land use issues in the Sawtooth. So, can you just talk a little bit about that history?
Sure. Boren and I believe his brother, they own a section of land, a ranch up in the Sawtooth area outside of Stanley. There have been disagreements about land use in that Sawtooth National Forest and Sawtooth National Recreation Area. There's usually a lot of permitting and permission that you have to get to build things on those public lands. Neighbors of Boren's have said he built an airstrip on his property before getting the required permits. Before his appointment, the Forest Service claimed that one of I think it was a mining company under his control, had built an unauthorized cabin near some of those mining claims, and it was kind of a question when he was appointed if his kind of history of butting heads with the Forest Service here in Idaho would come up in
Hmm.
the confirmation hearing for him. But back in June, that didn't really happen. Only 5 of the 23 members came to the hearing, and he did not get too many pointed or harsh questions, from what I recall several months ago. But so since those appointments and hearings have happened, these appointments have just pretty much been sitting on the Senate calendar, blocked by procedural moves. And now the Senate has essentially, I don't know if they've approved everyone, but they've cleared the backlog of positions that they had not been. They've done all the job interviews basically, and now the
Hmm.
hiring is official, if you want to put it in kind of layman's terms.
All right, appreciate that, Logan. So, Brian, let me bring you into the conversation. You recently wrote an opinion piece in the Idaho Statesman in regards to what you're calling vengeance politics. And you frame this truly as a presidency driven by revenge. What kind of led you to that conclusion?
Well, the easiest way to reach that conclusion is by just looking at the words of Donald Trump himself at CPAC before he was elected. He promised voters, "I will be your retribution." So that's a fairly clear statement. And in the context of the government shutdown that's ongoing now, he has posted on social media that he plans to get rid of a lot of things, and they'd be Democrat things. So this is in this case, the form vengeance politics is taking is trying to turn the gridlock over the shutdown into an opportunity to use executive power unilaterally to harm blue states.
So I want to talk a little bit more about that, Brian, because uh, the Trump administration has said that they will withhold billions of dollars in infrastructure and energy funding in blue states while the government shutdown is going on. What should folks be understanding about this move?
Well, the key thing about this move is that it's a unilateral executive branch move. These are appropriated funds. These are funds that Congress has set aside. Congress, by the Constitution, is supposed to hold the purse strings, and by the Impoundment Control Act, a piece of legislation passed during the Nixon administration, um, the president is not supposed to be allowed to withhold funds that have been appropriated by Congress. Nonetheless, it's happening. And it's happening in a targeted way at blue states, specifically New York is the biggest target, and that's widely believed because the Senate leader Chuck Schumer is there, and so is the Democratic House leader Hakeem Jeffries. So
Hmm.
the thing about this is that it sets a precedent. So if this is allowed to stand, and if Idaho's congressional delegation doesn't do anything to combat it, there's nothing to stop a Democratic president in the future from doing the exact same thing to Idaho, and they'd have no say about it.
Okay, so that's also what I wanted to talk a little bit more about is how this decision um, could impact Idaho and other red states. I mean, as you said, these cuts are targeted at blue states right now, but um, we should also note, Brian, that when it comes to who gets more federal funding, it's usually red states versus blue states.
That's particularly the case for Idaho. The most recent data I saw showed that Idaho got about $6 billion more in federal payments than our residents remitted in federal taxes last year. Or sorry, the 2023 year before. Um, if you compare that to New York, New York New Yorkers paid 89 billion more in federal taxes than they received. This is a fairly consistent pattern. It varies state by state, but on the whole, red states and lower income states like Idaho tend to be net recipients of federal spending, and higher income blue states tend to be net givers. So what this means is Idaho's more exposed to a potential attack like this. If the feds decided to, if a Democratic president in the future, as an act of revenge, decided to withhold federal funding from Idaho, the effects here would be much more immediate and much worse than they are in a place like New York.
Mhm. So, Brian, you describe this, and I'm quoting from your article, naked abuse of executive power. So, why do you think that there's been so little pushback from Republicans in Congress? In particular, there's been little or no pushback from Idaho's delegation. And as you just laid out, in the future, Idaho could be very vulnerable.
Yeah, so there has been a little bit of very tepid pushback, namely Representative Mike Simpson, early in Trump's term said he didn't like the idea of impoundment sort of in general, but he's basically gone silent on topics like that while he's posting on social media cheerleading sort of a cooked up indictment against James Comey, for example. Sort sorts of negative naked partisanship and naked submission to the president that we really haven't seen from him to that degree before. As for why they're being silent, it's that's up to them to say. I think to a significant degree, major parts of the Republican caucus in general are afraid of the president. They're afraid that he'll yell at them on social media, that he'll campaign against them, things like that. And so that may be what's motivating our delegation, or maybe they just don't take this threat seriously. That'd be up for them to say.
So before we go to break, Brian, in your opinion, how does this kind of political retribution really fit into the larger fight over the current government shutdown?
Well, it's attempting the president and his staff are attempting to use this to turn up the heat on Democrats. There's not it's not obvious that it's working right now. The Democrats don't seem to be budging off their position that healthcare needs to be funded in order to fund the government, namely the ACA enhanced tax credits. Um, but it's just a continuing escalation of the brinkmanship we've seen over issues like this for a long time. And so the thing that it's important for Idahoans to think about is what does the next step look like? What does it look like? how do we begin to suffer if there is a Democrat in power who decides, you know what, they took a swipe at us last time. I'm taking a swipe at them this time. And so that's a question that's worth thinking about and worth asking your lawmakers about.
So, Max, folks in Valley County are heading to the polls in just a few weeks to vote on a significant issue. So, I would like to start with the basics on this for people who aren't familiar. What is the Mountain Community Center District, and what would it do for people who live in the McCall and Donnelly area?
Yeah, sure thing. So the vote on November 4th, it would create the new district and elect a five-person board of directors. And their plan is to construct a 120,000 square foot indoor recreation facility that could also be used for community events. And propose that what that looks like is a large field house. On the main floor there would be a full-size turf soccer football field with bleacher seating. On the top, you'd have an elevated track. And their plans are to have this be sort of a convertible space. Like it could be four smaller fields, softball and baseball fields, could be used for pickleball, batting cages, any number of sports you can fit into there.
Hmm.
And it would be let's see, I think the state's fifth auditorium district. The others are Boise, Nampa, Idaho Falls, and there's one in Pocatello.
So, the proposal, if I'm understanding this right, would be funded through a new hotel and short term rental tax. So, can you walk us through exactly how that would work?
Yeah, definitely. This would add 5% onto all hotel and short-term rental bills in the district, which would include the northern half of Valley County, basically. Donnelly, McCall, Brundage Mountain Resort as well in Adams County, and let's see, Tamarack Resort would be included too. So 5% of your hotel bill would go to this proposal. There are no property taxes associated with this proposal at the moment. Although
Hmm.
auditorium districts are allowed to add property taxes if they want. You can tax up to 0.4%, but only in districts with less than 25,000 people. But again, that's not part of this proposal currently.
Okay, so you mentioned that this is not a property tax increase, and I'm curious about how important this point is for supporters who are trying to sell this idea to voters.
Yeah, that's been pretty central to the messaging from the district. I think voters in Valley County are feeling a bit tapped out when it comes to property taxes. For example, a Valley County recently approved a tax increase for emergency medical services, which now collects about 4 million per year, and that went to the voters three times. It failed twice before it was finally adopted.
So, how much could this new lodging tax then add up if, let's say, you're a visitor staying in McCall or Donnelly? And I guess how much money could potentially come in to this new district from
Hmm.
how they would tax this?
Right. Organizers are projecting about $1.5 million per year in revenue. And that comes
Mm.
from that 5% tax, which you're right. In McCall, that could be significant. So just to spell it out, statewide, all hotels and short-term rentals are subject to 8% total taxes. McCall has two local option taxes, which as of January 1st will add 8% to that bill. It's currently 7%, but it goes up 1% January 1st. And then with this 5%, if you're staying at a hotel in McCall, you get a 21% tax at the bottom of your bill.
Mm.
That's less in Valley County, the unincorporated area. That would be 13%. And in Donnelly, where there's a 1% lot tax, you get 14%. But
Okay,
let's see. Yeah.
so my question is this then. So, since this would stack on top of these existing state and local lodging taxes, Max, have you heard any concerns that higher rates might discourage tourism? I mean, what are hotel owners and short-term rental owners saying about this proposal?
Yes, they're very concerned about that. We talked to several hotel and short-term rental operators in town, and that was their main concern. The biggest complaint they get is that, let's see, here's a fun quote: 16% taxes on hotels are already just outrageous for a lot of customers, is what one manager said. Very steep. It's a lot. I think hotel operators are worried that visitors will choose to go elsewhere. I mean,
Hmm.
with that being the most complaint, it's a main concern of theirs. Some pointed out too that some interesting things I hadn't considered, like many of their guests are construction workers. who will probably keep coming
Mm.
if this tax is enacted. It just would get included in their bill, and the extra cost would go to the homeowners who have hired them to work on their property. So that could potentially make construction a little more expensive. And then you
Mm-hmm.
talk to short-term rental owners, particularly those rented by second homeowners. They feel like they could be taxed out of the market with that type of thing.
So, bottom line, this goes to the voters. What, the first Tuesday of November, and is it just a straight majority it would go through, or how does that work, Max?
That's right. Yeah, 50% plus one majority, and you can create an auditorium district in Idaho. And I did want to touch
Okay.
on one kind of interesting thing that came up in about this.
Uh huh.
Talking to people in the street. I mean, this is not a an official poll by any means, but a lot of people mentioned
Yeah.
that it feels like a bit of a referendum on short-term rentals to a degree. I mean, concerns about affordable housing undergird a lot of the stories we write, and houses being used, second homes particularly, for short-term rentals is a major concern when you talk about affordable housing. Since Idaho doesn't really allow short-term rentals to be regulated, some people kind of see this as kind of an indirect way to do that. And I think that was kind of an
Hmm.
interesting thing that came up in chatting about this measure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Drew, the Wilkes brothers are back in the news, and they're offering use of some backcountry roads. Can you quickly refresh our memories on who the Wilkes brothers are?
Yeah, so the Wilkes brothers are Idaho's favorite Texas billionaires. They they made their fortune in fracking and Texas oil industry um, about 20-25 years ago, and then about 10 years ago they kind of burst onto the scene here in Idaho. They bought some 170,000 acres of land in west central Idaho, including about 60,000 acres combined between Valley and Adams counties. It immediately made them by far the largest landowner, largest private landowner in each county. And then since then, they've occasionally ruffled feathers with development proposals or gating road access to their private lands that were um, kind of formally treated as public lands by the private timber companies that sold them to the Wilkes brothers about 10 years ago. So um,
Okay, so,
the Wilkes
so
brothers.
what so what would this new proposal, I guess what exactly is this new proposal, and what would this mean for roads in Valley County?
Yeah, so this current proposal, Valley County Commissioners are set to have a public hearing on this next Wednesday at the courthouse in Cascade. But essentially, this current proposal involves DF Development, which is the company owned by the Wilkes brothers. DF Development would deed about a dozen Forest Service road. They would deed public rights of ways on these roads to the county. Um, Essentially, I mean, what it would mean on the ground day one is if the county accepts this, instead of these roads being known as, whatever Forest Service road number, they would be named. DF has proposed names for all these roads. That's in the story and in the application as well. Um, but just to orient everybody where we're talking about here, I mean, this is so if you're familiar with, there's a place called Clear Creek Station south of Cascade along Idaho 55. It's probably most well known for, there's like a bar and pub there that half of it on the exterior of the building is painted for the University of Idaho. The other half is painted
Mm-hmm.
for Boise State. Okay, yeah, so I hear you already know what I'm talking about now.
Yep.
So if you turn right there, there is what's known as Clear Creek Road or Forest Service Road 409, and you follow that road back up into the woods. That's where we're talking about. That's where all these public rights of way would be. That's where DF is looking to convey these roadways to the county.
Okay, so Drew, how then would this proposal impact public access to that land and to recreation areas?
Well, and so that's what's kind of interesting. It would change nothing today,
Hmm.
really. I mean, these roads are currently public today. You and I could turn down there and drive through them, no problem. However, from the county's perspective, the county P&Z administrator, she has recommended approval of this conveyance because what it would do is permanently preserve that access, by the county by the county holding those deeds, those public rights of way, there would be no potential for DF development to gate those roads in the future. It's unclear if they have any intention to do so. They did not respond to my request for comment. They are typically pretty difficult to get a hold of. So it's not clear that they have any intention to do that, but this would kind of nip that in the bud and prevent a potential legal battle from the county's perspective.
Would the county then be responsible for maintaining these roads?
Well, and so that's where it's also kind of tricky. It's it's kind of a gray area where today they are responsible for maintaining the roads today. For example, if there was a washout, on one of these roads, um, it would ultimately be at the county's discretion what does or doesn't happen there. Property owners on the other side of the washout could come forward to the county and say, hey, we want to repair this road, and the county could issue the permit for them to do that work, or the county could decide on its own volition, hey, there's a washout, we need to let's go fix this. Um, However, they would not be obligated to maintain these roads to any greater level than they do today, simply by accepting the conveyance. There's no obligation associated. So really, the county's maintenance of these roadways into the future, if the conveyance is accepted, would be at the discretion of the county commissioners. They would decide whether to uptick that level of service or not.
So, bottom line, Drew, what's at stake with the commissioner's decision? I mean, what happens if they approve it? What happens if they don't?
Well, one of the things, there's obviously the aspect of gating road access. Could that happen in the future? Could it not? We don't know. So there's that side of it. That comes off the table if the proposal's accepted. I know the other thing from the county's perspective that's really critical about this and kind of falls in line with that gated access, is there's currently quite a few homes built up around Horse Thief Reservoir, which the main
Hmm.
access into those homes is by way of Warm Lake Road. And so the roads included in the conveyance that DF is proposing would solidify a link that would basically provide secondary access to those homes along Horse Thief Reservoir by way of Clear Creek Road, that one down that we mentioned by Clear Creek Station, the University of Idaho Boise State building. So then it would basically improve wildfire resiliency. If there was a bad fire up in the area and say access through Warm Lake was not feasible, those homeowners, they would still have a way to get out. So that's certainly one of the important things for the county. The other thing is by naming these roadways and replacing the Forest Service road numbers, it's preferred by first responders for emergency access, just from the standpoint of clarity on where exactly these properties are. So it would be beneficial in that regard. The backdrop of all of this is DF Development's Legacy Creek Ranch project, which I reported
Hmm.
on a couple months ago. I can't remember if I came on Idaho Matters and talked about it or not. But essentially, it's a pseudo subdivision proposal. It was not subject to the county's subdivision rules because they own so much land back up in there, somewhere in the neighborhood of just over 13,000 acres in this specific area we're talking about, that they're actually able to just sell parcels. They didn't need to subdivide their land in order to create this pseudo subdivision. They've just got enough parcels back up in there that they're selling them in a format that if you looked at it, you'd go, that's a subdivision, but it does not qualify as a subdivision. So this whole road
Mm.
conveyance thing and naming these roads, this is all kind of a piece of that.
Through the McCall City Council and the McCall Chamber of Commerce are starting to work together. They want to find a joint tourism plan. And it seems they really do want to keep local residents, like, coming first when it comes to this idea. And in fact, I believe, was it a city council member that said building the community's foundation first? I mean, that's what they need to do. So, can you just tell us what this plan could potentially look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So this plan is kind of the details remain kind of murky at this point. We kind of just the city kicked off this process a week or two ago. So we don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I think the best way to kind of frame it and think about it is um, looking at tourism from, if you will, the whole ecosystem perspective, right? You know, there's all these different groups, entities, businesses that are affected by tourism, and so this plan would kind of seek to meld all those together and determine, okay, what are the stressor points? You know, what are the goals? What are some strategies for achieving those goals? It would kind of bring all of that together for the first time in a way that certainly hadn't been done in the McCall area.
And Drew, talk to us about this idea of what someone's calling destination management.
That's kind of the philosophy that informs the plan itself. There was a consultant out of Hood River, Oregon, who was presenting to the council on this topic. But the idea is to bring in all those stakeholders to determine what those needs and stressors are. So in McCall, for example, potential stakeholders that would be involved in drafting that plan would be, you know, the Payette National Forest, Brundage, Tamarack, Ponderosa State Park, um, short-term rental owners. You know, there's just all kinds of different interests that kind of inform what that plan needs to be. And so destination management really focuses on that, is bringing all those perspectives to the table to figure out what does sustainability really look like.
Sydney, for years, there was what people called the Boise Hole, right in the downtown Boise. It's actually where the Zions Bank building now stands. And now the city of Meridian kind of has a similar issue with this Union 93 project. Can you give us some background on Union 93?
Yeah, absolutely. So Union 93 was supposed to be a large mixed use project in one of Meridian's urban renewal districts. Um, when the construction crews went in to work with the developer, they got some of the like podium parking, I think it was, started and built this structure of concrete and rebar. And then the project stalled. And this was a couple of years ago when we reached out to the developer about why the project had stalled. They had said something about that they just needed to replace a crane and that things would be back up soon. Um, well, things never started back up. And come to find out, there were all of these lawsuits and liens filed against the property from contractors who were not paid. Um, and it racked up like millions of dollars worth of unpaid bills.
Mm.
So yeah, the property went into foreclosure recently, and that's kind of where things stood until this week.
Okay, so tell us about that because it went to auction, and who bought this?
Yeah, so there were actually two auctions. One happened a little earlier for a portion of the property, and that was one of the contractors that was owed money on the property. They got that portion of the land at auction. This week, Allquist and Pacific companies went in and they bid for the rest of the property. Um, and it was over $6 million was their bid, and
Mm.
they won. So they effectively purchased this property.
So has Allquist or Pacific Companies said what they're planning on doing with this?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of unknowns right now. I mean, they just got it yesterday, and
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of a complicated thing because there is this, partially constructed structure on the property. I spoke to both Tommy Alquist and Caleb Roop yesterday, and they said that there's going to be a lot of having to go in and and see what is structurally sound on the property. And they said they hope that they can reuse the structures that's already there, but they'll have to go in and see, and then from there they'll have to look at, is what was originally planned still a viable project? Will it work in the market? Do they need to pivot? Um, and so there's definitely a bunch of different variables with this project. Caleb Roop was very confident that whatever happens, something will move forward, and it will be a mixed use project that is multifamily, he said, at its core. So definitely housing will still be a large portion of this project. But as far as specifics on, what's Union 93 or whatever it's called in the future going to look like, we don't know.
So, Drew, talk to us about the potential for a boat washing station at Payette Lake, and this would come on board next season.
That's right. They're still in the early stages of this, but this is basically a continuation of the milfoil infestation problem in Payette Lake that I've been reporting on quite a bit since last spring. Right now, with that, the Idaho State Department of Agriculture and City of McCall and Big Payette Lake Watershed Advisory Group are working together on a long-term management plan for that. Um, that is really supposed to get underway in earnest this winter. Right now, ISDA is still up to its eyeballs with quagga mussels and everything going on down in the Snake River. But over the coming months, they expect to develop that plan. But in the meantime, the advisory group said, hey, we don't know what's going to be in that plan. That's all still to come. But what we do know is a boat wash station would help. And that's something that we can do by next boating season. Earlier this year, throughout the course of one of many meetings they've had with ISDA, the advisory group was told that, look, the state will provide the equipment for one of these boat wash stations. Staffing is the issue. The state can't commit to
Mm.
staffing it. And so it was kind of like, look, help us help you. If we provide the equipment, will you guys staff it? And so the advisory group wants to push for that to happen. We don't know any of the exact details yet on exactly where this boat wash station would be. It
Hmm.
sounded like it would more than likely operate mostly on like a Friday, Saturday type of schedule, those peak periods, those peak boating times. Um, and as far as locations, we don't know, but near one of the marinas, there's two public boat ramps on Payette Lake, one right there by Mile High Marina, of course, and then the other within Ponderosa State Park. And so the idea is that essentially you would need to prove that you passed a boat wash inspection before you could launch on the lake during those days.
Hmm. And Drew, talk to us about why this is so important. I mean, you mentioned the infestation of quagga mussels in the Snake River. I mean, could Payette Lake see something like that as well?
Well, that's certainly the fear, right? I mean, quagga mussels, as most of us know, they're just tremendously destructive, particularly
Hmm.
for bodies of water with drinking water systems. And of course, that's where McCall gets its drinking water, is Payette Lake. So that's there's kind of two sides of this, right? One side is, yeah, we want to keep invasive species out of Payette Lake, like the quagga mussel. But then there's also the reality that we have this invasive Eurasian water milfoil problem in the lake, and we don't want to transport that to other bodies of water from Payette Lake because, and this is fascinating. I always have to bring this up every time I talk about milfoil. Um, it's this kind of long vine-like plant that grows in relatively shallow water around the shoreline of the lake, and whenever it breaks, whenever a swimmer swims by and kicks it, or a boat propeller chops it up,
Hmm.
uh, those little fragments then can go on to produce whole new plants. And so if you have those fragments in ballast tanks from boats that have been wake surfing on Payette Lake, or just any sort of way that those could get transported, it's that prolific of an invasive species that it really could spread that simply.
So is the likelihood then, Drew, that they will have this boat washing station in place next season to hopefully make sure that these invasive species stay at bay?
I think there's a lot of motivation to make it happen. Whether it will or not, I mean, we'll see. I think um, there's a lot of people pulling in the same direction on this issue, and you know, from where I sit, I think that Payette Lake is one of the most important, if not the most important things to people in and around McCall. And so if I was a betting man, yeah, I would expect this to be in place by next year, but we'll see.
All right, appreciate that update on that. Sydney, there is even more development that could possibly be coming to South Meridian. So, can you first tell us exactly what we're looking at, because it's more than 140 acres. So, where is this located?
Yeah, so there is 142 acres of land located near the intersection of Victory Road and 10 Mile, that could be slated for development in the near future.
And what are they looking at potentially when it comes to that 142 acres in terms of development?
For sure. So there's a mix of a little bit of everything. And again, this is still very early stages. So um, like the plans that have submitted are basically a bubble map. But this concept map shows over 52 acres of the property being dedicated to single family homes, 19 acres being dedicated to another type of housing product. Um, and then there's just over 5 acres slated for commercial use and 66.5 acres dedicated to what it says is a future West Ada Elementary School and
Mm.
high school study site.
Well, and Sydney, you mentioned this would be near 10 Mile and Victory Road. I mean, I feel like every time I drive by that 10 mile interchange on Interstate 84, that area just continues to explode.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially north of the interchange, there's been a lot of both commercial and multifamily development. This being on the south side, it's a little bit removed from it, but not too much. I
Hmm.
mean, if these homes got built, they would be about a mile and a half away from Shields, Target, that's planned, the Lifetime Fitness that's planned, and so definitely just a hop, skip, and jump down the street. Now, granted, you would have to hop, skip, and jump across an interchange, so
Yeah,
probably a car drive, but yeah.
a lot going on there. Yeah, and as you said, this is just in the preliminary stages, though. This development.
Yeah, very early stages. It would still need an official application filed with the city before it could even consider moving forward.
Hmm. Well, I want to thank all of you so much for joining us today. Appreciate all of the work that all of these journalists do. We've been talking with Max Silverson. He is the editor of the Star News. Sydney Kidd is a reporter with Boise Dev. Brian Clark joined us earlier today. He is the Idaho Statesman opinion writer. Logan Finney is with Idaho Reports on Idaho Public Television. And Drew Dotson is reporter and editor for the Valley Lookout. You've been listening to Idaho Matters from Boise State Public Radio. I'm Gemma Gaudet.
Sources and methods, the crown jewels of the intelligence community. Shorthand for how do we know what's real? Who told us? If you have those answers, you're on the inside, and NPR wants to bring you there. From the Pentagon to the State Department to spy agencies, listen to understand what's really happening and what it means for you. Sources and Methods, the new national security podcast from NPR.